Josh Frydenberg, welcome.
I would say it'd be good to be with you, Sarah, but I wish we were here under different circumstances.
We all do. That was your first visit to Bondi today.
Yes.
How would you describe what you found?
Sorrow, sadness. I looked at the messages that were in that bed of flowers. Messages from Jewish and non-Jewish Australians of condolence, but also empathy and hope, and a message just of solidarity as well. But I did pick up enormous anger among those who were there, because this massacre at Bondi, Australia's worst, most deadliest terrorist attack, the greatest loss of Jewish life anywhere in the world, outside of the State of Israel after October the 7th, was all too predictable. The signs were there for all those who would dare to see, and nothing was done. And now people are demanding both accountability and action.
You said today that the Prime Minister should take personal responsibility for the deaths on Sunday. How is the Prime Minister personally responsible for the actions of terrorists who follow an extreme ideology in the form of ISIS?
Well, you're right to point out the extreme ideology, the same ideology, and it's an Islamic ideology that has taken the life of 88 Australians in the Bali bombings, that took the lives of innocent Australians here in Sydney at the Lint Cafe, that has now taken the lives of at least 15 people at Bondi. And from the hours after October the 7th, there were radical Islamic preachers who were standing up and saying that they saw the act by Hamas as one of courage, that they needed to take pride in. This was the message that was being sent to the Muslim community of Australia for the last 2.5 years. And now we've found out,
by some aspects of the community.
Now we've found out that one of the shooters is linked to the factory of hate in Bankstown. So under the Prime Minister's nose, for the last 2.5 years, these preachers have gone about radicalising their constituency, and now that is being carried out in the most horrible circumstances, with the death of innocent Australians at Bondi, a national icon, including a 10-year-old girl, Matilda, whose family came here from Ukraine, whose parents took that name because it was the most Australian name they could think of. That's the horrible reality of a failure of leadership.
We are united in our repulsion and our deep sorrow for the loss that occurred in Bondi. That is the thing that unites us all. But to come back to that question, because it is also a political point that you are making, that the Prime Minister is personally responsible, I want you to lay out carefully what it is that he failed to do personally as Prime Minister that contributed to the attack with the information that we have now.
Absolutely. So from the hours after October the 7th, we saw those scenes outside on the steps of the Opera House, where people were celebrating the death of Jews. Since that time, we've had the doxing of Jewish creatives, we've had the boycotting of Jewish businesses, we've had the firebombing of places of worship, synagogues across the country, we've had childcare centres bombed, and we've had daily protests. All of this has occurred on the Prime Minister's watch. And these events have created in Australia a radicalised community upon which not only have Jewish Australians been attacked, but all of Australia has been attacked. Now, the Prime Minister has been told repeatedly along the way that stronger action needed to be taken, not just to ban the preachers, but also to ban these radical Islamic organisations like Hizb ut-Tahrir, which are banned in the UK, banned in Germany, banned in moderate Muslim states, but is not banned here in Australia. To prosecute and to prosecute those who are creating all this intimidation and hate and incitement to violence, to do more at our universities, to do more in our arts sectors, to better fund the security of the Jewish community. And of course, we've found out now that these killers at Bondi had spent time being radicalised and trained in the Philippines and were able to get weapons here in Australia. So these are questions that must be answered. And yes, ultimately, if the Prime Minister is not responsible for the death of 15 Australians, who does he want it to be?
I think the question goes to some of those points that you've just made, and we should of course, point out to viewers that we are in the early stages of understanding the trajectory of these killers. Some things are known already.
I'll tell you what is known, Sarah.
Yes.
And it's come from the federal police themselves, that these people were radical Islamists, that they had an ISIS flag in their car, that they put out a manifesto.
Yes.
Right, they'd been trained in the Philippines. They had got firearms here in Australia. They'd been linked to these places, these factories.
But this is if I may, Josh Frydenberg, the question is around the direct connection between the failures, as you described them, of the Prime Minister and the decisions that these specific men took. As we know from the information we have already, they were, as we understand it, on a path of radicalisation. At least we know that about the younger of the two, although ASIO had decided that he was not someone they needed to continue to follow. So the question is, how do you perceive the link between what we have seen on the streets in Australia, what we saw at the Opera House after October the 7th, and the journey to radicalisation of these people? Because you are saying it is unquestionably connected.
The dots are very easy to join for the last 2.5 years. And I don't know why anyone would seek to defend the Prime Minister after we've just seen...
Certainly not what I'm doing.
Well, I hope not.
I'm getting you to elucidate on the...
Sarah, we've just seen 15 people murdered in cold blood. Children, rabbis, Holocaust survivors. Policemen injured. I heard today one has lost an eye. Right? People attacked at our national icon, which has been desecrated, Bondi Beach. Right? And we're now hearing about this radical Islamic ideology. My point to the Prime Minister is he sits in a chair of authority. He now needs to use it. He's not a politician who's going to fix this. He has to be a leader who fixes this.
Let me ask you about what the role of a Royal Commission. I want to be clear about this. Are you calling for a Royal Commission into the events at Bondi and all the precursor events, or a Royal Commission into anti-Semitism per se, separate from that?
This is a Royal Commission that needs to look backwards as well as forwards. There are lots of questions that haven't been sufficiently answered. How did these people get guns? How were they radicalised? How were they trained overseas? How did they escape the eyes of our authorities? Why was there only 3 police protecting 1,000 Jewish people at a Hanukkah festival in an open space at Bondi in a time when concerns have been heightened and the security environment is very worrying? Those are practical questions that need to be answered. But also, what were the warning signs over the last 2.5 years? What could have been done that wasn't done to tackle the preachers, to tackle the protesters, to ban these organisations, to improve our immigration stances, to deal with our universities, to respond, Prime Minister, to your special envoy on anti-Semitism's report, which has been with him for more than 150 days, a perfect metaphor for the lack of urgency and the lack of action by the government. So we need to understand all of those things, but we also need from the most eminent jurists and also from the most eminent security professionals a roadmap for going forward, a legislative framework so that we actually take action both federal and state and local across all aspects of society to ensure that Australian citizens are safe again in their own country. Because right now, Australia is not safe for Jews, and this attack has been an attack on the soul of Australia.
Let me ask you this question. The loss and trauma in this moment is extreme, felt most acutely by your own community, by the people of Bondi.
By every Australian, I hope.
But of course by wider Australians. Isn't this a moment to bring the community, the whole Australian community, together rather than begin with blame?
The question that must be answered here is, how do we prevent this ever happening again? That's not a question that can be answered with soft words, empty words. And that, unfortunately, is what we've heard from our government for the last 2.5 years. I sat in the audience in November 2023 at the Melbourne Holocaust Museum when the Prime Minister told Holocaust survivors, the people who have seen the utmost tragedies of the world, and said to them, I promise you I will not allow anti-Semitism to get a foothold in Australia. They were his words. What a failure that has been. So at the end of the day, we can all hold hands in a moment of kumbaya, but that is not going to bring back the people who have died, and that is not going to protect those who have lived. And I'm focused on actions and results. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your political persuasion is. I don't care if you're Calathumpian, for goodness sake. All I'm focused on is the safety of Australians. It's the first and fundamental duty of our Prime Minister, of our premiers, and they have failed.
One final question to you. It's widely viewed as inevitable that you will return to politics. How do we not see this through a political lens? I mean, the case that you're making, a personal case against the Prime Minister.
I'm deeply offended by what you just said. I'm deeply offended.
Explain that.
And you know what? There was a man called Murray Watt who sits on the Labor front bench who tried to say that about a year ago. And then Labor ministers like Mike Kelly and others, hear me out, who came out and said exactly what I'm about to say, which is that is an insult. That is an insult to say that there's any political motivation in this.
It's a question.
No, Sarah, the reality is this. I'm an Australian who has to have personal security because my life is endangered in this country. And I was the treasurer of this country. My children go to a school where there are armed guards outside. When I visit a Jewish aged care centre, there are armed guards outside. When I send my kids to Jewish sporting clubs, there are police cars out there and police tape. How should we live with this? Why should we live with this? So if I'm not going to speak out, who is? If not now, when? If not me, who? The reality is this was an attack on Jewish Australians, but this is a threat to every Australian.
To be clear, my question was about the framing of what you are saying. I'm not making assertions. I'm not copying what anybody else is saying.
And Sarah, and you asked me the question and I gave you my answer. But I want to remind your viewers that historically, the Jewish community in Australia has received overwhelming bipartisan support. The greatest supporters included Doc Everett, a leader of the Labor Party who was there for the formation of the State of Israel as the President of the General Assembly. Bob Hawke, who said if the bell tolls for Israel, the bell tolls for all of mankind. Julia Gillard, who I interviewed in my documentary, who was just horrified by this rise of anti-Semitism. Bill Shorten and others. This is not a partisan issue. This is a leadership issue. This is about the safety and the security and the soul of Australia. And if I don't use my voice now, I don't know when I would.
The purpose of questions is to elicit strong answers. We certainly did that. We all offer our condolences to the community that suffered so much, and thank you for talking to me.